I'm Taylor, a 30-year-old graphic designer living in Capitol Hill, Seattle. Even though my career is flourishing, I've always felt like a lonely shadow within my own family. This year, I pinned all my hopes on a family getaway to Santa Monica, California. I took charge of organizing everything, rearranging my work schedule and even canceling a few major client meetings, to devote myself entirely to my family. But the moment we arrived, I was stunned to discover they'd forgotten to reserve a room for me. That instant changed everything about how I saw our family bonds. Before I go on, leave a comment telling me where you're joining in from, and if you've ever felt overlooked by your family, don't forget to follow along for stories about standing up for your own worth. Ever since I was little, I could sense my parents, Diane and Michael, playing favorites between me and my older sister Brooke. They never admitted it, but every glance and every whispered word carried a silent comparison. I worked tirelessly to build a solid design career, partnering with major brands nationwide. Meanwhile, Brooke chose a more traditional path, marrying her college boyfriend and having their first child, little Chloe, who's now 6 years old. "You've got a family now," my mother told me one Christmas, not realizing how those words made me feel cast aside. It was as if, without children of my own, none of my achievements held any value. My therapist, Jessica, has spent months helping me set boundaries and communicate with my family. "They might not even realize how hurtful their words can be," she said, during our final session before the trip. Clinging to hope, I believed this vacation could be our turning point. I threw myself into preparations with the goal of reconnecting, listing restaurants in Santa Monica, creating a shared activity schedule, and calling the resort 3 times to double-check every detail. Carving out a full week wasn't easy. My design firm had just landed the Harrison and Company account, a project that could elevate our brand to the next level, but I told myself, family comes first. I delegated tasks to my assistant Maya and promised to check my email each evening. When our family reunited at the airport, a warm wave of emotion washed over me, and I thought I'd made the right choice. My mother hugged me tightly. Her perfume smelled as familiar as it had when I was a child. "Taylor, you look radiant," she said, smoothing my hair as she used to when I was little. My father, a man of few words, gave my shoulder a gentle pat, his eyes somehow softer than usual. Brooke arrived with her husband Ryan and little Chloe half an hour later. Chloe darted into my arms like a baby bird returning to its nest. "Aunt Taylor, did you bring me a gift from San Francisco?" she chirped, melting my heart. "Of course," I smiled, already picturing her reaction to the colored pencils and sketchbook I'd carefully selected to fuel her love of drawing, a passion we share. That first dinner at the beachfront restaurant felt like a dream. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink as we laughed and swapped stories about the past year. My dad, who rarely smiles, laughed out loud when I told a tale about a demanding client. Mom asked detailed questions about my new projects, and even Brooke, usually guarded around me, listened intently as I described plans to expand my studio. After dinner, I handed out each gift: a handcrafted leather wallet for my dad, a handwoven silk scarf for my mom, art supplies for Chloe, and jazz concert tickets for Ryan, because he's a true music aficionado. For Brooke, I had painstakingly hunted down a first-edition copy of the children's book she adored as a child, a gift I'd spent nearly a month tracking down. "Taylor, this is amazing," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the vintage cover embossed with intricate floral motifs. In that moment, I recognized the sister I once knew, before responsibilities and distance drove us apart.
Though our reconnection felt promising, an invisible gap still lingered. But as we discussed plans for our week at the beach, I sensed a flicker of faith returning. I'd booked a dolphin watching excursion that Chloe would love, arranged a visit to Brook Green Gardens for my mom, who adores sculpture, and scheduled morning beach swims. Everyone was excited, treating my itinerary like a minor miracle. That night, in the quiet of my hotel room, I called Jessica. "This feels different," I said softly. "It seems They're finally starting to see me. That's a positive sign, she replied gently. But stay in the moment and don't demand perfection. Sometimes a small step is a giant leap. I fell asleep with my heart full of hope and emotion I hadn't felt in years during a family reunion. Maybe this trip would be the turning point. Maybe I would finally be seen as a true family member instead of someone standing on the sidelines. The next morning, as the two rental cars pulled into the luxurious Santa Monica resort, I held my breath. Palm fronds rustled in the salty breeze, and the arched entrance reflected the cloudless sky. A courteous doorman opened my car door, smiling politely in his crisp uniform. Bellhops whisked our luggage to the grand lobby, where vaulted ceilings and crystal chandeliers scattered sunlight across the marble floors. At the center stood a massive floral arrangement, its fragrance mingling with the ocean air. I leaned toward my dad and whispered, "Isn't this incredible?" He nodded, satisfaction shining in his eyes. My mom approached the reception desk first, smiling confidently. "We have a reservation under the Williams family," she told the clerk, Emma, whose name tag gleamed. I stood behind her, quietly watching. Emma typed on her keyboard, but her expression shifted. Her eyes flicked to me and back to the screen. I sensed something was off. "Yes, that reservation is for Mr. and Mrs. Williams, one suite for the grandparents, one for the daughter's family, and one double bedroom," she said, her tone polite but hesitant. A chill ran down my spine. 6 of us, but only 3 rooms? I stepped forward, trying to stay calm. "There should be 4 rooms." I confirmed that. Emma avoided eye contact. "I'm sorry, but the reservation shows only 3. I can check for availability in case there's an opening." I nodded, trusting it was just a technical glitch. But after a few minutes of searching and frowning, Emma summoned the manager, a middle-aged man with a gold nameplate, Mr. Harrison. After reviewing the system himself, Harrison turned to us apologetically. "I'm terribly sorry, but the resort is fully booked this week due to the National Real Estate Brokers Conference. We simply have no more rooms." The air grew heavy. My mom spoke as though this were an expected inconvenience. "It's fine. Taylor can share a room. There's a rollaway bed available." She spoke as if it were perfectly reasonable, uh, an arrangement made from the start for me to be squeezed onto the sofa to sleep. Her words struck me like a bucket of ice water. "This wasn't a mistake. You never intended to book a room for me to begin with." "Did you two know about this ahead of time?" I asked, forcing myself to stay calm even as I stood in the crowded lobby. "We thought it would be fine," my dad replied softly, taking the room key from the manager's hand. "After all, it's just for sleeping." From behind me came Brooke's voice, syrupy with feigned concern. "Oh, is there a problem with the accommodations?" I turned to face her. She was standing next to Ryan, clearly uncomfortable, while little Chloe was mesmerized by the tropical fish in a tank in the corner. "For now, there's no room for me," I said, my tone flat. Brooke's lips curled into a half smile before she could muster any real sympathy. "Oh, what a shame." But it's understandable. I booked one room for me, Ryan, and Chloe since we're one family. Family? Uh, those words cut into me like a reminder that I didn't belong in that circle. One by one, everyone wheeled their luggage toward their rooms. I stayed behind in the lobby, calling every hotel in the area on the off chance of finding a vacancy, but everywhere was fully booked. This week, Santa Monica is sold out because of the National Real Estate Brokers Conference, the receptionist said with regret in her eyes. And we're in peak season. I had no choice but to trudge back to my parents' room. My mom was folding clothes into the closet, and my dad was watching a golf tournament on TV, his face as cold as the room. "That salon chair pulls out into a bed," my mom said, pointing to the corner. "We'll get you extra blankets and pillows." "Why didn't you book me a room?" I asked directly, for the first time forcing myself to confront the question I'd always avoided. My mother sighed, folding a shirt with exaggerated care. The resort only allowed 3 rooms under the discounted package. We all thought it made sense. Nobody thought to tell you in advance. Carry-on. I clenched the handle of my carry-on. If I'd known, I would have found my own place. I wouldn't be standing here like an extra. I really think you're making a big deal out of this, Taylor, my dad called from the bed. Your sister needs privacy with her husband, and you're on your own. On my own. Those words echoed through my mind like an empty cave, summoning memories of the time I was 14 and had to sleep on a folding cot by the door at Disney while Brooke got her own big bed. Or Thanksgiving dinners where every dish was tailored to her taste and I was just there. I stood by the door, carry-on unopened. I wanted to turn away. I wanted to leave immediately. But where could I go? Every hotel was full. I felt trapped, both literally and figuratively, in the position of the perpetual afterthought. Fine, I spat out bitterly. I'll make do. I told myself it was probably just a misunderstanding. Maybe they truly didn't mean to hurt me, and if I didn't make a fuss, this trip could still be salvaged. But a small voice inside me whispered, this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a clear message. I would always come last. At lunchtime, the family gathered at the poolside restaurant. Sunlight filtered through the palms, casting dappled shadows over tables heaped with seafood platters. I grabbed a few fish tacos, but the salt in my mouth wasn't from the sea. It was the choking ache that refused to fade. What is everyone planning for this afternoon? My dad asked cheerfully, as if nothing had happened. I think we should head to the beach, Brooke suggested. Chloe's dying to build a sandcastle. I saw my chance to speak up. Before we plan what's next, can we clear up the sleeping arrangements first? I asked. Just find another hotel, Taylor. We've already talked about this, my mom cut in, sighing as if I were a child interrupting grown-up matters. All right, could we try something else? I persisted. Maybe Chloe could stay with you a couple nights and I could sleep with Brooke and Ryan. Ryan looked up from his phone, hesitant but silent. Then Brooke jumped in with decisive finality. Nope. Chloe needs her routine, and we need our own space. Because we're a real family. There it was again. Real family. As if I, single, childless, were a deficient version, unworthy of the term. What do you mean by that, Brooke? I asked, my voice tightening. My dad cleared his throat loudly, changing the subject as always. Hey, did anyone notice? The dolphin watching trip comes with a sunset package. Should we upgrade? Their classic dodge made my stomach twist. They always did this. Ignore the conflict and pretend everything was fine. Calm on the surface, freezing inside. Aunt Taylor, where will you sleep? Chloe piped up, tugging at my sleeve. Will you sleep with Grandma? Oh. Before I could answer, Brooke cut in, her tone casual yet cruel. Aunt Taylor can sleep wherever, sweetheart. She doesn't need anything special like we do. Her gentle words felt like another slap in the face. I stood abruptly and excused myself to the restroom, emotions choking me. In the marble-tiled bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face, fighting back tears. The mirror reflected me, a grown woman, successful yet still battling to be seen. Memories stormed back like a hurricane. Brooke always had new clothes while I wore hand-me-downs. Even though money was never tight, every piano recital of hers had both parents cheering, while my graduation was overlooked because it conflicted with their anniversary trip, one they could have easily rescheduled. Even Jason, my college boyfriend of 3 years, had once yelled in anger, "Why do you keep trying with people who will never truly appreciate you?" I had no answer. Then he left. When I returned to the table, the conversation had already shifted back to beach plans as if none of it had happened. I sat quietly, observing, feeling like an anthropologist, studying strangers rather than a daughter, a sister, a piece of their blood. That afternoon, I tried once more. My parents and I walked along the shoreline, waves washing in rhythm, like a heart trying to keep time. I need you both to understand the sleeping arrangements made me feel like I don't matter, I said slowly, using everything Jessica taught me about healthy communication. When everyone else gets priority except me, that sends a very clear message. I'm not important. Mom linked her arm with Dad's as if forging an alliance. You're always so sensitive, Taylor. Not everyone's out to get you. This isn't about feelings, it's about basic respect. Dad sighed loudly. Your sister has a little one to think about. When you have a family of your own, you'll understand. Priorities shift. But I'm family right now. As myself, I said, meeting their eyes directly. They exchanged a look I couldn't interpret. Mom patted my hand in a sickly sweet tone. Of course you're family. Now let's go change for dinner. It's almost time. Later, when I went to grab a towel by the pool, I overheard Brooke behind one of the lounge chairs. Taylor always blows everything out of proportion over sleeping arrangements. She still wants to be the center of attention. If she'd settled down instead of chasing some fantasy in the city, she'd already have someone to share a room with. I froze behind the canvas partition, each word stabbing me like a pinprick. I didn't catch what Ryan said in response, but I didn't need to. Brooke's words alone shattered whatever hope I had left. This wasn't a misunderstanding, not carelessness or an innocent oversight. It was a deliberate choice, a reflection of how they've always seen me. I stood motionless behind the towel rack as a wave of memories crashed over me, dredging up old scars. Mom and Dad forgot my 30th birthday and only called to wish me happy birthday 3 days later. That Christmas family photo, everyone in coordinated red and gold outfits, yet I was the only one, never told in advance, standing out like an outsider. Last year's dinner when I got promoted to creative director, Mom praised me with just one sentence. Then the whole family spent half an hour discussing Brooke's new curtains. In that moment, under the harsh Santa Monica sun beating down on my shoulders, I realized something I'd avoided my entire life. I'd been trying to fit into a mold my family never made for me. A voice inside me, steady, unwavering, rang out, enough. For the first time ever, I wondered what would happen if I walked away from this role. If I left this family vacation without notice, without permission. The thought both squeezed my chest and gave me an odd sense of relief. I asked myself, is their opinion really more important than my self-respect? That evening, Dad chose an upscale seafood restaurant right on the shoreline. High vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific Ocean, driftwood chandeliers casting a warm glow. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner. Under different circumstances, I might have found this setting enchanting. But in that moment, it felt suffocating, like being cast in a lavish play I didn't belong in. When the server brought drinks to the table, Brooke immediately spoke up. Tomorrow, we're all going to the water park. Chloe can't wait. I ventured, how about visiting the sculpture garden first? Mom said she really wanted to see that exhibit. Brooke didn't even look up from her phone. Chloe would get bored there. We should pick something everyone will enjoy. Everyone? I asked. Mom nodded without hesitation. Well, she's the only kid in the family. I took a sip of wine, fighting to stay calm. I chose activities suitable for every age. The sculpture garden even has a butterfly pavilion for children. Butter Park, Chloe cheered, coloring in her kids' menu. Dad laughed. Looks like the majority wins. I pressed my lips together. 3 out of 6 isn't a majority. My voice was quiet, but the table fell silent. Brooke rolled her eyes. Here we go with the math lesson. Taylor, things aren't always fair. I need you both to understand the sleeping arrangements made me feel like I don't matter. I said slowly, drawing on everything Jessica taught me about healthy communication. When everyone else is prioritized except me, That sends a very clear message. I'm not important. Mom slipped her arm through Dad's, as if forging an alliance. You're always so sensitive, Taylor. Not everyone's out to get you. This isn't about feelings, it's about basic respect. Dad sighed loudly. Your sister has a little one to care for. When you have a family of your own, you'll understand. Priorities change. But I am family right now. As myself, I said, looking them both squarely in the eye. They exchanged a glance I couldn't read. Mom patted my hand in a saccharine tone. Of course, your family. Now, let's go change for dinner. It's almost time. Later, when I went to grab a towel by the pool, I overheard Brooke behind a row of lounge chairs. Taylor always blows everything out of proportion over sleeping arrangements. She still wants to be the center of attention. If she'd settled down instead of chasing some fantasy in the city, she'd already have someone to share a room with. I froze behind the canvas partition. Every word stabbed me like a pinprick. I didn't catch what Ryan replied, but I didn't need to. Brooke's words alone shattered whatever hope I had left. This wasn't a misunderstanding, not carelessness or an innocent oversight. It was a deliberate choice, a reflection of how they've always seen me. I stood motionless behind the towel rack as a wave of memories crashed in, dredging up old scars. Mom and Dad forgot my 30th birthday and only called to wish me happy birthday 3 days later. That Christmas family photo, everyone in coordinated red and gold outfits, yet I was the only one never told in advance, standing out like an outsider. Last year's celebratory dinner, when I was promoted to creative director, Mom offered just one sentence of praise. Then the whole family spent half an hour talking about Brooke's new curtains. In that moment, under the harsh Santa Monica sun beating down on my shoulders, I realized something I'd been avoiding my entire life. I'd been trying to fit into a mold my family never made for me. A voice inside me, steady wavering, rang out, "Enough." For the first time ever, I wondered, what would happen if I walked away from this role? If I left this family vacation without notice, without permission? The thought both constricted my chest and gave me an odd sense of relief. I asked myself, is their opinion really more important than my self-respect? That evening, Dad chose an upscale seafood restaurant right on the shoreline. High vaulted ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Pacific, driftwood chandeliers casting a warm glow. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner. Under different circumstances, I might have found this setting enchanting. But in that moment, it felt suffocating, like being cast in a lavish play I didn't belong in. When the server brought our drinks, Brooke immediately spoke up. Tomorrow, we're all going to the water park. Chloe can't wait. I ventured, how about visiting the sculpture garden first? Mom said she really wanted to see that exhibit. Brooke didn't even look up from her phone. Chloe would get bored there. We should choose something everyone will enjoy. Everyone? I asked. Mom nodded without hesitation. Well, she's the only kid in the family. I took a sip of wine, struggling to stay calm. I picked activities suitable for every age. The sculpture garden even has a butterfly pavilion for children. Water park! Chloe cheered, coloring on her kids' menu. Dad laughed. Looks like the majority wins. I pressed my lips together. 3 out of 6 isn't a majority. My voice was quiet, but the table fell silent. Brooke rolled her eyes. Here comes the math lesson. Taylor, things aren't always fair. Things aren't always fair, especially in this family, I blurted, words spilling out. Some people always get priority, others always have to yield. The air grew heavy as lead. Ryan suddenly focused intently on the wine list, and my parents exchanged anxious glances. If you're still upset about the sleeping arrangements, Mom began. This isn't just about a bed, I cut in. It's about a pattern of behavior that's repeated for years. Brooke let out a mocking laugh. What pattern? You always see yourself as the victim, right? Brooke, Ryan said softly, but she ignored him. You know what your problem is, Taylor? You think the world revolves around your career. Meanwhile, we have real responsibilities, families to care for. I stared her down, my lips pressed into a firm line, holding back a surge of emotion. You think I don't have responsibilities? I said, my voice low but clear. I have things to protect too, and the first is myself. I put a major client project on hold just to be here, I added, keeping my tone even. Oh, those little sketches of yours, Brooke sneered, waving her hand as if I was just doodling in a notebook. Try having a child to raise. Then you'll know what it means to put someone else first. Now, come on, you two, Dad interjected in a warning tone, trying to douse the flames. But it was too late. Something inside me shattered, like a dam long cracked finally bursting. Decades of bottled up emotions poured out in every word I spoke next. I have always put others first. I reschedule my work. I'm the one who calls to check in, remembers birthdays, sends anniversary cards. I listen every time you complain, and I cheer you on every time you achieve something. But has anyone in this family ever done that for me? You're being unfair to us, Mom said weakly. Really? I looked her in the eye. When was the last time you asked me about my work without changing the subject after 30 seconds? Has anyone ever prioritized my needs or even thought that I have needs? Just then, our server, Jonathan, approached to take our orders. He froze at the tension, then backed away, whispering, I'll come back later. Well, this is just great, Brooke hissed. You're making everyone uncomfortable. I laughed. A short, hollow sound. You're accusing me of making the vacation uncomfortable? Do you even know what it feels like to discover you're the extra person left out of the room reservation? Like you don't belong? No one excluded you, Dad growled. Is that so? Mm. I looked at him. Just a practical arrangement based on who deserves it and who doesn't, right? We just needed private space for our family, Brooke shouted, flinging her napkin on the table. I, Ryan, and Chloe are a real family unit, and anyone who doesn't fit that unit can take the hit. That's the best decision for everyone, right? The restaurant fell into stunned silence, maybe because I was shouting, or because the sound of my own blood pounding in my ears was so loud. The words, real family unit, echoed in my mind, like a blade cutting into a wound that hadn't healed. I set my napkin beside my untouched plate, took another sip of wine, and stood up. I felt strangely light. If I'm not part of this real family unit, I spoke with terrifying calm, then I'm leaving. All four eyes stared at me, wide with shock. They never expected me to stand up like this. Taylor, sit down right now, Dad ordered, his tone the same as when I was 12, but it held no power anymore. I'm not speaking out of turn, Mom jumped in, panic in her eyes. You're overreacting. I looked at Brooke. Her expression shifted from smug to flustered, edged with panic. I'm not being dramatic, I said. I'm making a choice to remove myself from a place where I'm not valued. I grabbed my bag and walked away from the table with a straight back. For the first time in years, I felt I was walking away from myself. I heard Dad call my name behind me, but I didn't turn around. In the hotel lobby, I asked the front desk to call me a taxi back to the resort. The ride was silent, but my mind was clearer than ever. I knew my next step. Back in my room, I packed quickly and neatly, as if I'd never been there. I left a handwritten note. I've made other arrangements. Have a wonderful vacation. As I wheeled my suitcase through the lobby, I heard Brooke's voice. She rushed ahead of our parents to block my path. You're being ridiculous, Taylor. You're going to ruin the whole trip just because you weren't coddled, she sneered. I'm simply not staying where I'm not wanted, I replied evenly. Where do you think you'll go? This whole area is sold out, she said. That's no longer your concern, I answered without taking my eyes off the exit. Brooke's face flushed, not just with anger. There was something else. You're breaking mom and dad's hearts, she said. You're so selfish, Taylor. I let out a quiet laugh, a bitter smile. Isn't it funny how setting boundaries makes you selfish, but treating someone like an afterthought is called practical? At that moment, Ryan appeared behind Brooke, genuine worry in his eyes. Taylor, maybe we can talk. I believe we can still figure something out. It's too late, I said without anger, just stating the truth. Some things, once left until the last minute to patch up, they lose their value. Right then, Mom and Dad hurried into the lobby. Mom's cheeks were flushed, her eyes wild. Taylor, don't do this. She grabbed my hand. We can switch. Mom and Dad, take the sofa. You can have the bed. In the past, such regret might have softened me, but not today. It's not about a comfortable bed anymore. It's about respect. We've always respected you, Dad said, his voice choking with emotion. Perhaps for the first time. No, you haven't, I replied softly, but I respect myself enough to walk away. I strode straight out the grand entrance where the taxi was waiting. Through the glass doors, I saw my family standing motionless. Shock was written on their faces. The first time they realized I really could disappear. The car pulled away. I glanced back at the resort, the place I'd pinned all my hopes on for healing, and watched it recede into the distance like a fading shadow. I cried, but not just out of sadness. Part of those tears was pure relief. You okay, miss? The driver asked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. Not yet, I answered hoarsely. But I will be. I unlocked my phone and scrolled through every booking app. All nearby hotels were fully booked, but when I widened my search radius, I found the Sea Cliff Hotel, a boutique inn perched on a seaside cliff about 30 minutes away. Could you take me there? I asked, handing the address to the driver. He nodded. I leaned back, watching the city lights fade in the rear window, like stepping out of an old life into something uncertain but entirely my own. My phone buzzed relentlessly, messages, missed calls, from Mom, from Dad, from Brooke. I switched it to silent. The boutique hotel appeared like something out of a painting, a renovated, historic mansion, quiet and elegant, nestled among greenery and the sound of waves. I stepped into the lobby. A young receptionist named Amber greeted me with a warm smile. Do you have any rooms available? I asked, bracing for disappointment. Amber checked her screen. You're in luck. Someone just canceled the presidential suite. That's our last available room.
I'll take it, I said immediately, handing over my card. I knew the rate would blow my budget, but I'd never spent money that felt more worthwhile. Tough day? Amber asked, as if she noticed the traces of tears on my cheeks. I'm ending my family vacation early, I said with a wry smile, and maybe that's the best part of the trip? Amber nodded sympathetically. Family can be the most exhausting getaway of all, but trust me, our presidential suite is just what the doctor ordered. A bellman named Marcus appeared to escort me upstairs. My phone kept buzzing. Now 47 times, I turned it off. The suite took my breath away. A high 4-poster bed, a fireplace, a seating area, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the vast ocean. The marble bathroom featured a deep soaking tub right by a window with panoramic sea views, like a living painting. Is there anything else you need, ma'am? Marcus asked quietly. I shook my head. No, this is more than enough. It's perfect. The room was so silent I could hear my own breathing. I sank onto the plush bed and wept, without restraint, without shame. I cried for the little girl in me who'd tried so hard to be seen but was never enough. I cried for the grown woman who still sought approval from a family unwilling to give it. I cried for relationships I'd once believed sacred, only to discover they were one-way demands. When my tears finally subsided, I felt something new. Peace. a whisper like the ocean breeze. Freedom. For the first time in my life, I chose myself, I set my boundary, and didn't back down. I filled the tub, sprinkled in lavender salts, and watched the sun sink below the horizon. The sky turned a magnificent blend of pink and orange, reflected on the endless water. Tomorrow might bring new challenges, but tonight, in this room I chose, I felt the stirrings of a new life, a strength I'd never known. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains. The distant sound of waves greeted me like a new day's hello. I blinked awake, taking a moment to remember where I was and why. Instead of confusion or regret, I felt an extraordinary lightness. I stretched out on the king-size bed, savoring every second of this space. My space, just for me. The hotel's restaurant sat in a glass-walled conservatory overlooking the garden and the sea beyond. White-jacketed servers moved gracefully, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. I was seated at a window table. As I perused the menu, a woman at the next table smiled and called out, "First time at the Seacliff Hotel?" "Can you tell?" I replied with a gentle laugh. "You have that I can't believe I found this place look," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Rachel." "Taylor," I said, shaking her hand. "Dining alone?" Rachel asked as our breakfasts arrived. "My Belgian waffle and her eggs Benedict." "Long story," I said. "I was supposed to be here with family, but things went off course." Rachel nodded knowingly. Family vacations can feel like emotional minefields. I decided to come solo this time, needed a detox after a crazy year at work. Her openness put me at ease. I told her about the room mishap and my exit, something I hadn't shared with anyone else. "Well done," Rachel said earnestly. "Not everyone has the courage to set boundaries with their family. All their lives they're the doormat, until they never escape." Her words struck me to the core. Before we parted, we exchanged numbers and planned to meet again for dinner, a budding friendship in my journey of self-healing. Back in my room, I checked my phone. It buzzed incessantly. 50 missed calls. Twice as many texts. From Dad, "Call us back now." From Mom, "Please let us know you're safe." From Brooke, the tone swung from, "Why did you ruin everyone's vacation?" to, "Taylor, I'm really worried, where are you?" I typed a single line back to my parents. "I'm okay, but I need space to think." I sent one last message to my parents. "I need to be respected, and I need time to rethink how I've been treated." Then I silenced my phone, tucked it into my purse, and stepped out of the hotel into the charming seaside town. Unlike the bustle and commercialism of Santa Monica, this place felt like a world apart. Pebble-strewn lanes shaded by trees, art galleries tucked into Victorian storefronts, coffee shops hidden in renovated heritage buildings. It was like walking into a living painting, every detail gentle, refined, and utterly unlike the pace I was used to. At a local tour office, I met Brandon, a guide with sun-bleached hair, a warm smile, and an encyclopedic memory of every nook in the area. "Most tourists never make it this far," he told me when I inquired about a private tour. "They miss the coast's best parts." That afternoon, I followed Brandon along a coastal forest trail, a narrow path that led to a pristine white sand beach you won't find in any guidebook. "Locals call it Glass Beach, for brag," he said. "It's as peaceful as its name suggests." The day unfurled like a movie, a picnic lunch beneath the lighthouse, a visit to a small pottery studio where I picked out a hand-thrown mug as a keepsake, and an afternoon tasting wine at a hidden vineyard up on the hill. For the first time in years, I shared photos, moments from my day, on social media. A small, slightly cheeky part of me wanted my family to see that I wasn't just okay, I was thriving on my own. Late that afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Ryan. I hesitated, then answered. "Taylor, thank God you picked up. We've been frantic." "I already said I'm fine," I replied gently. "I know, but I just want you to know that the way they handled the room was wrong. I should have spoken up sooner." I was surprised. Ryan was always polite, but he'd never before sided with me in family matters. "Why didn't you say something earlier?" I asked, not accusing, just wanting to understand. "As a husband, you pick your battles," he sighed. But when Brooks said real family, I realized how cruel and mistaken that was. "Thank you for saying that," I whispered, feeling seen for the first time, however small that validation felt. "Where are you now? We're all going crazy looking for you." "I'm not ready to say. I need space." "I understand. Just take care of yourself." After the call, I scrolled through my messages. My parents had shifted from worry to pleading, offering to swap rooms, even cut their vacation short. Brooks' texts swung between anger and concern, especially after seeing my posted photos. "Who were you with? How did you get a room?" she wrote. I didn't reply. For the first time, I chose silence as an act of self-determination, and that silence carried the weight of a lifetime spent people-pleasing. That evening, I had dinner with Rachel in the hotel's glass-walled restaurant overlooking the garden and sea. Over local seafood and a bottle of fine Sauvignon Blanc, we spoke of work, love, and the cracks in family bonds. "My relationship with my sister wasn't easy either," Rachel admitted. "She was always the perfect one, doing exactly what society expected." "Did it get better?" I asked. "Yes," she smiled. "When I stopped expecting her to be the ideal sister and learned to accept who she really is, with her limits and flaws." I didn't check any more messages. Choosing silence, something that used to make me feel guilty, had become a clear declaration of my autonomy. I slipped my phone into my bag and set off to explore the enchanting seaside town where I was staying. This town was nothing like Santa Monica, no neon signs or chain restaurants. Instead, narrow cobblestone streets, boutique shops, art galleries, and cafes inside restored Victorian buildings. At that same tour office, I met Brandon again, his sun-kissed hair and encyclopedic knowledge immediately recognizable. When I asked about a private excursion, he laughed. "Very few visitors come here. They miss the coast's most beautiful stretch." That afternoon, I joined him on the forest trail to a secluded beach known only to locals, where a handful of seagulls wandered on the wet sand. "They call this Glass Beach, Fort Bragg," he said. "You won't find it in any guidebook." The day revealed a hidden world. A picnic beneath the lighthouse, a stop at a craftsman's pottery workshop to buy a handmade cup, and a wine tasting at a tucked-away hillside vineyard. I started sharing photos online, something I rarely did. A part of me, slightly mischievous but honest, wanted my family to see that not only was I surviving, I was actually happy. That night, Rachel invited me to a rooftop wine gathering at the hotel. Under string lights and the sound of the waves, I mingled with other guests, a retired professor and his wife, a novelist seeking inspiration for her next book, and an in-house counsel taking time off for mental health. Unexpectedly, Brandon appeared to drop off some local festival flyers. He joined our group and we toasted under the moonlight. Among these strangers, none aware of my painful backstory, I felt a freedom I'd never known. These fleeting connections were genuine and effortless, no need to prove myself, no pressure for recognition. Brandon told us about a beachside concert. We all agreed to go. We wandered the moonlit streets to a bonfire on the sand, acoustic music drifting through the night as we danced barefoot under the stars. I realized that was real happiness, not the forced joy of pleasing others, but a pure, simple delight of my own making. Back in my room, on an impulse, I decided to extend my stay for another week. I had the leave days. And I had zero interest in returning to that family vacation. I booked a paragliding lesson for the next morning and signed up for a scuba dive. Experiences I'd always dreamed of but never allowed myself. It wasn't cheap, but I'd worked hard my whole life and rarely invested in myself. Today I chose me. Lying on the bed, the waves outside whispered. 24 hours ago, I was shrinking myself to fit a role they'd assigned. Now I was expanding my world, living fully without asking permission. Before sleep, my phone buzzed, a message from Mom. Please come back, we can make it right. They called every hotel within a 30-mile radius, Dad admitted. Took us 3 days. It sounds like quite the effort, I said, meeting their eyes. But if that was the case, why didn't you choose the easier path, respecting my request from the start? Brooke let out a mocking laugh. You can't just vanish during a family vacation and expect everyone to act normal. I noticed them surveying the boutique lobby, marble floors, crystal chandeliers, courteous staff. In their eyes I saw something unfamiliar. And, Taylor, how can you afford a place like this? Mom asked, suspicion and the insinuation of extravagance in her tone. I have a successful career, something you never bothered to ask me about, I replied calmly. The room went silent. Then little Chloe ran up and threw her arms around my legs. Aunt Taylor, did you see dolphins? She asked, her innocent eyes melting my resolve. Yes, sweetheart, a whole pod of them. Dad cleared his throat, trying to shift the mood. Maybe we should talk somewhere more private? Amber, the receptionist, seemed to read the situation. She stepped forward gently. The garden room is available if your family would like some privacy. And minutes later, we sat together in the sunlit garden room overlooking neatly trimmed hedges. A pot of tea had been set out, and our server had discreetly withdrawn. The reunion began awkwardly. You've made your point, Dad said in that familiar tone he uses for crisis management. Now it's time to come back and salvage the rest of our vacation. I tilted my head. What do you think I'm trying to say? And you're upset about the sleeping arrangements, Mom interjected. We all understand now, we can switch rooms. I shook my head. This isn't about the bed anymore, it's about a lifetime of feeling like the second choice in this family. Nonsense, Brooke snapped. You're always independent and successful. If anyone lives in someone else's shadow, it's me. Someone else's shadow? I echoed, genuinely taken aback. You're the one praised for following the path Mom and Dad wanted. I've always been seen as the odd, selfish one. Do you know what it's like? Brooke continued, raising a child, keeping a family together, all while hearing, Taylor's doing big things in the city, Taylor's so talented. That pressure isn't easy. Ryan placed a calming hand on Brooke's. My parents looked on as if watching a tennis match they hadn't served in. I think, Ryan said carefully, we've all misunderstood each other. For the first time, I considered that Brooke might have her own struggles. Maybe we were both caught in an unspoken competition neither of us signed up for. Misunderstandings aside, Dad began, we have 3 days left. This family is here to welcome you back. I will not be coming back, I said firmly. I've extended my stay here by another week. Their astonishment filled the room. Expressions almost comical if the moment weren't so tense. What about our plans? Mom asked. The dolphin excursion, the farewell dinner. I have new plans, I replied. Tomorrow I'm paragliding, the next day I'm scuba diving. Alone? Brooke asked, surprise and a hint of pity in her voice. Sometimes alone, sometimes with friends, I said, nodding toward the window, where Rachel sat reading by the fountain. A new friend? Here? Mom looked shocked, as if forging relationships independently were unimaginable. Yes, Mother, I can connect without family permission. Chloe, bored with grown-up talk, turned back to the window. Daddy, can we go see the fountain? I'll take you, Ryan said, guiding her out, creating space for the hard conversation that remained. With just the 4 of us left, I looked at my parents and Brooke without flinching. I'm not going back to a place where I'm the forgotten one. If we're going to keep any relationship, things have to change. Changed how? Dad asked, still seeing me as the stubborn child making a fuss. First, acknowledge that my life choices are valid even if they differ from what you value. Recognize me as an equal member of this family, not decor. Most importantly, understand that from now on, I will not accept being disrespected or sidelined again. Tears welled in Mom's eyes. We never meant to make you feel unimportant. Intent doesn't erase impact. I quoted Jessica, my therapist. You may not have tried to hurt me, but it happened nonetheless, and repeatedly for years." The room fell silent. Through the window I saw Ryan and Chloe playing by the fountain, and Rachel, my new friend, joined them, showing Chloe how to toss a coin and wish. Dad spoke up, and for the first time I heard a hint of regret in his voice. "Perhaps we haven't fulfilled our responsibilities as parents." I swallowed hard, my heart aching. "You're not bad people, you've just been inconsistent in how you love me." "We don't want to lose you," Mom whispered, as if afraid the wind might carry away her last chance. "Then this relationship needs to change." Brooke, silent until now, finally looked at me, her eyes sincere in a way I'd never seen. "The family comment that day was awful, I'm sorry. I spoke out of envy." I frowned. "Envious of what?" "Your freedom, your career, that you're living a life you chose for yourself, not one Mom and Dad drew up." Brooke gripped her wedding ring. "Sometimes I feel like I threw myself into the roles of wife and mother too early, before I even knew what I really wanted." Her admission opened a door, a possibility of empathy I thought would never exist. "I used to envy you too," I whispered, "because you fit the mold they loved. You had the closeness with them I never did." Mom and Dad stared at us, stunned, as if seeing for the first time the consequences of how they'd treated us differently for all those years. "So what do we do now?" Dad asked pragmatically. "Now we create a new way of living," I replied. "I won't return to that resort. I've booked another week here, but that doesn't mean I'll avoid the family." "What do you mean?" Mom asked, puzzled. "We can still spend time together, in shared activities, but I'll sleep where I'm respected." Ryan and Chloe returned, and Rachel lingered by the window. "Aunt Taylor, are you coming back to us?" Chloe asked, innocence in her tone. Ryan bent down and looked at her, then glanced at me. "She's working on a new plan, sweetie." "What plan?" Chloe pressed. I knelt to her level. "A plan where everyone can enjoy vacation in the way that makes them happiest, sometimes together, sometimes apart. Like when Mom and Dad go out on dates and you stay with Grandma." "Exactly like that," I smiled. Over the next hour, our family began negotiating terms no one thought possible just days ago. I agreed to the dolphin-watching trip and several shared meals while remaining at my boutique hotel. We decided to choose activities by listening to each person's wishes, with no favoritism, and above all accept that this is only the first step in a long healing process. When we parted, promising to meet at lunch the next day, Rachel approached me, her perceptive gaze as ever. "Family reconciliation?" she asked. "Temporary ceasefire with clear terms," I answered. "Tends to last much longer than pretending nothing ever happened." Rachel nodded. That afternoon, Brandon, the guide I'd met before, brought over flyers for a local art festival. He laughed when I told him the story. "Your family came all the way here to rescue you from a fancy suite with a private beach?" I laughed too. "They were afraid you'd become too independent. That worried them more than anything." As the sunset set the sky ablaze, Brandon's hand brushed mine, not gripping but not accidental. A relationship might be budding, unexpected but not unwelcome. A small reward on my journey of choosing myself. For the rest of the vacation, I maintained my boundaries while slowly rebuilding my connection with my family. Lunchtimes flowed smoothly, occasionally fracturing into old patterns that required me to gently but firmly reset the pace. Dad began sincerely asking about my work. Mom remained awkward at first but learned to stop before crossing into my autonomy. One evening, Brooke and I had a sisters-only night. After 2 glasses of wine, she admitted, "Mom and Dad always set us up as rivals. I thought your life was easier, you have their approval." I nodded. "And I envied your place in their eyes." We both laughed in relief. A laughter that shattered the invisible wall between us. Even Ryan showed a new side. During the dolphin trip, he pulled me aside. "What you did took so much courage. It made Brooke and me rethink how we communicate. My family didn't transform overnight. Old habits still resurfaced, but the core had changed. I no longer squeezed myself into their mold. I had begun to live authentically, and surprisingly, they adapted. When the vacation ended, they returned home while I stayed on a few more days. Our goodbyes were imperfect, but more genuine than ever. "This vacation didn't go as planned," Mom said as she hugged me, "but perhaps it happened exactly as it needed to." For the first time, I completely agreed. 6 months later, I sat in Jessica's office watching autumn leaves fall outside the window as I recounted our most recent family dinner. "Dad asked so many questions about the Harrison & Co. campaign," I told her, still amazed. Not small talk. He genuinely wanted to know how the creative process worked. Jessica smiled. "That's a huge step forward. Since that fateful beachside confrontation, everything has changed, slowly but deeply. My relationship with my parents no longer follows the old pattern. They now treat Brooke and me more equitably. When planning Mom's 70th birthday party, she actively sought both our opinions, a first." "And Brooke?" Jessica asked. "She's improving," I answered cautiously. "We talk more honestly than ever. Just last week she told me she's considering going back to school for her master's degree, something she always dreamed of but shelved, thinking it wouldn't fit the perfect mother image. We're still in recovery, sometimes slipping back into old grooves, but the foundation has shifted. The old sibling rivalry has gradually been replaced by tentative empathy. We even set up separate monthly video calls, giving each other space to grow independently of our parents' influence. That confrontation at the seaside resort opened a new chapter in my life, where I laid the groundwork for self-respect and courage. From that moment on, everything changed. I boldly raised my design fees, something I'd always hesitated to do for fear of upsetting clients. Surprisingly, no one complained. My business flourished, my waiting list grew, and I now have the financial freedom to take on only the projects that truly excite me. Perhaps the biggest surprise has been the relationship I never saw coming with Brandon. Though I live in San Francisco and he's based in Cannon Beach on the Oregon coast, we stay in touch daily, long calls and regular visits. In him, I've found a respect and steadiness few men have given me, especially after relationships where I sacrificed too much of myself to keep them. The year-end festival's coming up, I shared with Jessica in a session. It's the first time in ages our family is gathering since that beach incident. "And how do you feel about that?" she asked. "Cautiously optimistic," I smiled. "We've established new traditions. Everyone has their own room at the hotel, no more cramming into one house. Our schedule includes both group activities and individual downtime. This change in logistics isn't just practical, it reflects a deeper mindset shift. For the first time, my family acknowledges that closeness doesn't require personal sacrifice, and that healthy boundaries actually strengthen bonds rather than threaten them." Chorus. "The journey hasn't been easy. There have been setbacks, tough conversations, and offhand remarks that reopened old wounds. Dad and Mom occasionally slip back into old patterns, and Brooke sometimes drops a half-joking, half-mean remark. But now, I no longer stay silent. I've learned to respond firmly but respectfully. That comment felt disrespectful, could you say it differently? Or, I'm uncomfortable with that arrangement, can we find a new solution? Gradually, they've learned this new language of respect and honest communication. Self-care has become a non-negotiable principle. I continue therapy, protect my creative time from unnecessary interruptions, and plan solo retreats to listen to myself. These aren't luxuries, they're the foundation of mental health and relationship quality. "What's the biggest takeaway from this journey?" Jessica asked as our session drew to a close. I thought for a moment. That respect can't be begged for. It must be established through firm boundaries. And sometimes, walking away, even temporarily, is the healthiest choice. 1 week later, my parents called to discuss next summer's vacation, exactly 1 year after the beach incident. "We've booked a mountain resort," my dad announced. "Everyone will have their own private room, and there's one room with a dedicated workspace just for you, yours to keep." I was speechless at their thoughtfulness, something I never could have imagined a year ago. We also thought, my mom added hesitantly. If things are still going well between you and Brandon, you could invite him to come along. Their recognition of my relationship, valuing it just as they once honored Brooke's marriage, was perhaps the clearest sign that they finally understood. That evening, as I was polishing a presentation for a new client, I paused to reflect on the moment that altered my life's course. The moment I stood up and walked out of that seafood restaurant, carrying with me my peace and intact self-respect. That decision didn't come from any strategy or plan. It flowed naturally from a sense of self-worth that had been building quietly for years. By demanding respect from my family, I was also learning to respect myself. By setting boundaries, I protected my own integrity and freed myself from the chains of others' expectations. And the paradox was this: in that act, I discovered my own limitless potential. That journey is still unfolding, marked by surprising growth and occasional hesitation. My family relationship isn't perfect, but it has evolved to become more authentic, more balanced, and above all, far more genuine than the forced harmony we once tried to maintain. Before bed, I closed my laptop with a light heart, thinking of all the people out there trapped in toxic family dynamics, sacrificing themselves to keep up appearances. They don't realize that sometimes, stepping away, even temporarily, can spark the deepest transformation. The greatest gift of that tumultuous vacation wasn't the luxury suite I claimed, nor even the change in how my family saw me. The real gift was the unshakable awareness that I am fully worthy, with or without anyone's validation. And once you own that truth, no one can ever take it away. Have you ever had to step out of a close relationship to protect your dignity and self-respect? If so, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. If this journey resonated with you, if you saw yourself in these words, please like and subscribe to the Vengeance of Max channel, because here we don't just tell stories, we heal them with honesty, courage, and the journey back to ourselves. Thank you for listening, and wherever you are on your own path, may you always find the strength to choose yourself, with love, with respect, and with the firm belief that you deserve it.